Well, hello there, and welcome to this, the 141st edition of DF Direct Weekly, which is and shall always remain Digital Foundry's weekly discussion show. Discussing the latest gaming and technology news, and we're doing this one hot on the heels of the Game Awards 2023. We'll be talking about some of the announcements there. Joining me to do so, first of all, Oliver Mackenzie. Hello.
Hey, Rich. Should be fun to talk about the Jeffs tonight. Exciting show. A little late for me, but fun as always.
Fair enough. And hello, Alex Battaglia.
Yeah, I did not catch the Jeffs live. I was too busy sleeping, but I did catch them this morning in all their glory, so I'm prepped and ready to go.
Excellent stuff. Well, let's crack on with our first news story. And our first news story is essentially, a boatload of major announcements at the Jeffs last night, including the sudden surprise drop of Baldur's Gate 3 on Xbox, which we'll be taking a look at in due course. But for this direct, we're going to basically be taking a look at some of the game announcements and trailers that caught our eyes. And I think we've got to start with Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, simply by virtue of the fact that we've seen the game several times over the past few years in trailer form, and I guess there's not been much revealed thus far in terms of gameplay, and there was a hue and cry for combat, and we got combat. We got lots of combat, gratuitous amounts of combat, some might say. Oliver, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, to me this looks really, really, really good. According to Ninja Theory, this is all captured on Series X. I mean, there's some obvious compromises, like there's some low-res volumetrics in the trailer, and there's like a little bit of aliasing, what I noticed, at least as far as I can tell, in this like really low quality
Yeah, it wasn't high quality.
Yeah, which I'm sure we'll complain about with a lot of these games, but it looks unreal, if you'll forgive me the pun. The meshes are super, super dense. The facial rendering is like some of the highest quality I've seen, you know, up there with Matrix Awakens and other really advanced titles. Some shots of the characters just look absolutely insane. The game does seem like to be presenting a little bit of a soft image in this presentation, but it's using a lot of depth of field and post-processing effects, so it's hard to make some determination as to the overall image quality of the title. In terms of UE5 features, I'd expect they're probably using all of the all the main ones. The only thing that I could really make out, given the state of this trailer, I did look for like SSR artifacts. I wasn't really spotting any. The shadows did seem quite finely detailed, so I expect, obviously virtual shadow maps are going to be a part of this one. I was just absolutely wowed by this, and the fact they actually showed off some gameplay, some real actual footage from the game, not just like close-up shots on the main character. I think it's terrific.
Alex?
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say this is much better. I mean, it wasn't I did like the fact that the last time they showed it off, it was like unadulterated clip of that gameplay. I think it was the first time they showed it off. It was like unadulterated clips of the gameplay, or it was the second time. I kind of like that style, but obviously mixing in with this like extremely chaotic music, it was very well done. Rendering wise, the issue I had with the trailer only was with the upload. Everything else I thought looked fantastic. If this Series X footage, then bravo to the team. It'll be a supremely handsome game on Series X. Especially, they showed off for the first time another main character, which I thought looked really, really... I don't know who the actor was, but that was a very good character model. My goodness. I noticed there was something wrong with the trailer when they first showed off. This is me looking at the VGA's, the Jeff's YouTube channel, is when they showed off the logo for Ninja Theory. I was like, that logo doesn't even look native. like this super low res looking logo. I was like, oh no. So I this is once again just a cry, a plea. If you're going to be uploading things to YouTube, try and get like the highest quality possible. And this trailer, a lot of unfortunately the art here doesn't lend itself to good YouTube quality anyways. Dark, bluey blacks and some reds in there, which are getting chroma subsampled and stuff. So it isn't like super YouTube friendly necessarily, but I swear there's different ways to do this. But other than that, I just want to say, like, I'm very happy to see it. One thing that I kind of love is that this, they showed off combat. If you played the first game, I wouldn't say like the combat is the height of it at all. But it seems to take a much more central role here based upon everything. It seems like a much more chaotic story. And because it's taking place in like Viking Iceland apparently, or something like that, which should be brutal. And it did give me some serious Rise, Son of Rome vibes with the combat. Yeah. I was just looking, I was like...
Some might say the original is similar in that regard.
Yeah, I would definitely say it is. But like just like the finishing move look to it, it didn't look like you were like tapping A and then doing damage, tapping A and doing damage or blocking. It looked like a lot of series of finishing moves that they were showing off the trailer, which gave me some serious Rise, Son of Rome's vibes. So that game lives on.
I think from my perspective, the takeaway I have is that there's a pleasing continuity in the quality of the assets all the way through the years. And it is literally years now that we've been seeing Hellblade trailers, every so often. And they seem to have, I don't know whether this will persist into the final game. Hopefully not, but they seem to be sticking with the 21:9 aspect ratio for it.
Good point.
But yeah, ultimately, what can I say? I mean, the character rendering, it seems to be a particular highlight, of course. That's something which we've seen right from the very first asset. If this is actual Series X capture, then this is just phenomenal stuff. Environments, beautiful. The quality of the art, just from start to finish, it just looks consistently brilliant. We do now have a confirmation. I don't know if we had it in the past, that it is going to be arriving in 2024 for PC and Xbox Series consoles. Man, I'm going to be really, really interested to see how it holds up on the Series S. Any further thoughts, Oliver, on this one?
No, I just think it looks terrific. I'd love to see some more of the game, some extended gameplay footage. Like we did see, weirdly enough, like you mentioned with that, I think it was the second trailer, because the first one was
right.
Yeah. The second one had that fight with a giant, and it was really big and it was exciting and it looked beautiful as well. And since then we've seen like progressively less gameplay. So I'd love to see more gameplay instead of less. But this at least showed some gameplay.
We got maximum stabbing now. Lots of stabbing.
Lots of stabbing faces and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that, there's so little that's actually shown, and the show itself, the Jeffs, is just so packed with content that it looks as though the key trailers get maybe 2 and a bit minutes maximum. And then, everything else, it's like a minute to 90 seconds. So it's a bit of a shame that everything is so rushed.
It should be almost, I feel, 2 different things. It should be an award ceremony on one day, and another day should be trailer-thon, if you will.
Yeah, in fairness, this is what Microsoft does with their Xbox stuff at E3, right? Where they have a sort of show of everything, and then they sort of go into depth on a bit more of the major titles, which I think is a great approach. Question is, in this case, I suspect that there'll be scenarios where only showing a limited amount probably suits the developer.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I just want to make a quick note about disclosure again, because we always talk about this during event shows. Some of the trailers actually did specify the source material and where it came from. A lot of it didn't. And, it's actually a bit jarring just to have different levels of disclosure. It should, it should be a blanket policy across the whole show, really. It really is important to know what we're looking at. So, to actually sort of disclose that this is actually running on Series X, captured on Series X, I think it's a really big deal that people want to know about, right? Similarly with the rest of the stuff in the show. But I guess that's all we've really got to say about that one. Let's move on to the next game that caught our eye. Okay, so, how do we tackle this one? Obviously, Hideo Kojima is a big friend of Jeff Keighley. There are lots of big hugs happening on that stage as Hideo's new game was revealed. It's called OD, and we saw a little bit of footage. The question is whether it's actually all game stuff or not. It's just not clear, to be honest. It's just a series of bizarre talking heads, I think. I think it's fair to say the quality of the rendering on the talking heads was absolutely phenomenal. Also interesting that there was disclosure of a move to a different engine. They're moving to Unreal Engine 5 and MetaHuman technology to produce what we saw today. There's still the fact that it is seemingly an Xbox collaboration. We'll talk about disclosure on Xbox a bit later. And Alex, what were your thoughts on this? Because, I don't know, obviously Kojima is an enigma. He likes to present early viewings of his content in an enigmatic fashion.
Very enigmatic here.
Yeah. There's not really a huge amount we can take away from this. Power the Cloud was mooted.
It's groundbreaking, to say the least. It's breaking new ground. So I like Hideo Kojima's body of work. I think the man is very interesting. But this did absolutely nothing for me. Mainly because it was contextless, and to me it looked like render test footage. With the whole point of like, it do you remember when they showed off, well, it's not even that, because that was like kind of like a tech hype trailer. What's the name of that?
Quantic
Dream. Thank you. It showed
the PS3 demo.
The PS3 demo was just like faces, just like faces. But here they were still like had the raw capture lighting. You could see it in their eyes, for example, like where they just probably mapped some specular there that made it look like that. And as a result, I just see these people saying what appears to be gibberish into a camera, and I just don't know what this is. Are these people talking to the cloud? Like, I just don't feel anything. So, here, I'm very interested in whatever the end product is. And the fact that it is moving to Unreal is interesting. I'm very curious as to why. Maybe it has to do with the fact that it plugs into the cloud in a certain way, and Unreal's already set up for that on the back end for Microsoft. Maybe it has to do with behind the scenes, you can only use Decima for X and X titles. It cannot be for Xbox, etc. And that is interesting in itself, but we'll only see what that means realistically when it comes to the game being shown off. Here, the idea that metahumans are maybe being used to drive the rigs that are shared across all these different characters, that seems reasonable, but it's also just a lot of nothing. And they go on stage and have an interview, doesn't say too much. Jordan Peele comes out, who I also really, really like. Unfortunately, also doesn't say too much. So I don't have really any big opinion on this at all as a result.
Except the rendering looks nice.
Except, presuming it's rendering. Like, it could just be test render footage. Like, it could actually be rendered out as a file, which you can do in Unreal. So that doesn't really tell you too much. Yeah.
Well, how do you top that? I'm just thinking, actually, occasionally developers or publishers get in touch and ask us to take quotes and put them on the packaging, and a whole lot of nothing. Alex Vitale and Digital Boundary would be a great one for this one. Oliver, do you have any additional takeaways?
Well, initially, I mean, the quality of the facial rendering is so high that initially I was like not sure that I was looking at a video game asset, and it was really took like the first two characters look almost pristine, especially little details like the teeth. But then in the depth of field, I could see just the tiniest bit of aliasing. And then the third character, who is a male who makes more exaggerated facial motions, then I was kind of seeing I was seeing kind of the blending and all this stuff. I was seeing a little bit of that. So I saw through the illusion eventually, but it was so so compelling. Maybe part of that is just because it was a not super high quality encode. But it's extremely impressive stuff with MetaHuman. Obviously, weirdly, Death Stranding 2 is also using MetaHuman despite not using Unreal, because MetaHuman kind of separately licensed before the Unreal acquisition. So presumably they have some experience here. But unfortunately, that's all we're seeing.
Yes.
In terms of what they talked about, they said it is a game or sort of transmedia. Or it's a new form of media. That kind of thing.
It's worrying, isn't it?
It's a Strand game. It's a Strand game.
Yeah, I kind of think that it's maybe not the kind of like big AAA effort for Xbox that a game like Death Stranding is for PlayStation, if you know what I mean. It's something different, and probably something that's not completely within the confines of traditional gaming. Maybe something like a Quantic Dream style title. I know we mentioned that before.
Yeah.
It's not too clear.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, the issue is that I really like Hideo Kojima games, but I really don't like the way he does narrative. I just find it incredibly dull. What can I say? And this has been the case since Metal Gear Solid 2, where, it just seems really self-indulgent as opposed to entertaining. That's been my take on it. And, it seems to be that he's doubling down on this sort of narrative side. Now, maybe this is heresy to a big bunch of people.
It is probably, right? Yeah.
But, the point is that Yeah, I'd like to have discovered more. Maybe it's just the fact that we're years away from this project actually materializing. I'd be really curious to know what the actual integration with the cloud is, why you need the cloud to do this game. What is the cloud doing? I find that really quite interesting because there are some really... I mean, we're moving into the age of AI and machine learning. There's going to be a huge amount of opportunity for new gameplay that is based on AI that does require, the cloud basically to do it. And whether that's involved here, we just don't know. I mean, it's very, very early days. A bit bizarre to focus so much on this, but I guess it is, Hideo Kojima, mate of Jeff Keighley.
Probably that's why.
A lot of airtime given to something where, it remains an enigma.
It's for me, it's also a little bit like, so I like Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 and the first game. And I thought the gameplay concepts behind Ground Zero and, eventually what would become 5, and Death Stranding is very interesting gameplay concepts itself too. But the kind of semi-obsession with getting stars to do things, as in Hollywood stars,
right,
is a little grating to me, because I just keep thinking like, balloon that budget out. Just balloon that budget out. You could get no names and it could be probably just as amazing, but it wouldn't be as glitzy or as glammy, and it wouldn't make such a great showing maybe at something like this.
Well, I think this is part of an overall strategy that a lot of creators have to actually further legitimize gaming as being on par with motion pictures. And I think that's fair enough.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know what you think of that, Oliver.
Well, I mean, I think in a lot of cases, actors are not that well suited, in particular for voice roles that might only be doing television or movies, because being a voice actor and giving a performance in the game is quite a different thing. In this case, you literally probably just have facial capture rigs and people delivering a pretty conventional performance, which does map well into this kind of game. But again, it totally remains to be seen exactly what this is, so I really have no further comment.
And even if it is a game.
If it could be described as a game, yeah.
The other thing, of course, was the whole Jordan Peele thing, where, he just basically turned up to say, I'm involved, but I'm not going to tell you what it's about. But what I will tell you is there's a bunch of other people involved as well. And then it sort of seemed to talk about goats for some reason. Yeah,
he's the goat.
There's various goats.
Various goats on stage.
Involved. So, interesting, diverting, not especially informative. Nice rendering on the characters. And I guess that's it. Right?
That's all I got.
That's all we got. Okay, well, the next game, which we do want to talk about, Moon Studios, No Rest for the Wicked. These are the guys, obviously, that did Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Ori and the Blind Forest. Amazing games. And this is their new game. And it seems to be an entirely different sort of, a complete departure from Ori. Mm-hmm. And it looks phenomenal. I think what I really like about it is that, first of all, the quality of the rendering is, as you'd expect from Moon Studios, just really, really impressive.
Yeah.
But more than that, they're actually doubling down on a stylistic look that I think not many people do these days. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely looks that way. It's also interesting to see, because this is presumably going to be a Unity game. Their last efforts were. So I would imagine it is. And it's interesting because it's like a high fidelity Unity game, and we don't see too many of those. We have like the one
Lego
game
Builders.
John covered a number. Lego Builders and the the people who made Munch's Odyssey. What are the name of those games? I always forget the name of those games.
Well, Oddworld.
Oddworld games. Thank you. Oddworld. We had Oddworld, Lego Builders Odyssey.
Yeah.
Not too many. Yeah, or whatever it's called. Lego Builders Adventures.
It's been a hard week.
It's been a long week.
We need to set up some sort of mind meld.
Yes.
So you can access my memory banks.
Yeah, I just need to do this. And, But seeing Unity pushed to new heights and also using stylized rendering to get the most out of it in a way, it looks really awesome. Also, a kind of darker look to the game. Ori is it's pretty cheerful, all things considered, and very just whimsical looking game. here, this looks actually kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to use the word Tim Burton-esque, but very, very kind of darker, but it has like tones of like something that children could enjoy. I don't know. It looks awesome. Gameplay wise, reminded me of Trine almost,
right.
or Diablo a little bit, but Trine is what kept going through my brain when I looked at this trailer.
Which is kind of odd because Trine is kind of more in line with the sort of 2.5D that
Yeah,
was.
this is true, but I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why I kept thinking of Trine, but it just must have been visuals at that point.
Oliver, any input?
Yeah, on the gameplay front, I kind of weirdly thought of Diablo. Maybe that's because of the art style as well, but also a little bit of God of War for some reason. Just the overhead camera got me thinking. But yeah, I love the way this looks. It combines a little bit more simple on the geometric side of things with a lot of painted on detail, which I think looks really cool. It looks a lot like paintovers in concept art. It's just a totally unique style. I mean, well, unique to the developer at least. The combat looked really cool. There's some physics interactions. One thing I really liked is that in every single scene you see so much animation, like lots of flowing grass, lots of wind. It's always keeping you, giving your eyes something to look at, something interesting in every frame. Lots of rain, lots of water, stuff like this. I thought that was just so cool. And even though this isn't maybe the most demanding in terms of rendering, I love the aesthetic. I love the overall presentation. I'm sure it's going to be great in HDR, just like Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I'm really excited for it. I'm really, really excited for it.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, there was a confirmation from the developer on Twitter, aka X, that this was actually running in real time. This wasn't a pre-rendered asset or anything like that, which is kind of what you'd expect from Moon Studios, right? I mean, these guys, they put so much effort into their craft that you would expect them to actually want to show the actual game. I don't know, again, the sort of the aesthetic kind of, I don't know, this is going to sound really weird, but there was kind of like a sort of modern day Ghosts and Goblins feel to it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it just looks really, really great. And I guess we are at the beginning of the marketing cycle for this. This is our first look at the game, and it's deliberately just teasing. But what can I say? I'm really hyped for this one. Just the environment detail, the quality of the animation, the stuff going on in the environments just looks awesome. Character rendering, very, very highly stylized. It really stands apart as looking different from most of the games that we see on a day-to-day basis. And gotta say, super hyped for this one. But I guess that's all we've really got to say about it. So I guess, Oliver, you wanted to talk about, well, I don't know if you did or not, but Monster Hunter Wilds. Obviously, it's going to be a big game. Monster Hunter is a huge series. And we got a snippet of the new game, Monster Hunter Wilds. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is, obviously it's a big game. I think we can probably assume it's RE Engine just because Capcom uses it for everything. And it looks a lot like RE Engine to me. We're just seeing brief snippets of the open world. I mean, I think the overall trailer clocks in at like, I don't know, a minute or something. It's very brief.
Yes, it's 90 seconds.
Okay, yeah. There's some very, well, we have a bit of a history with overanalyzing 90-second trailers.
90 seconds.
But there's some very cool traversal in here. To my eyes, though, this is not quite as impressive looking as what we've seen from Dragon's Dogma 2, which is obviously a game with sort of similar scope. So I'm interested to see where they go with it. I'm sure it will be a monster game in terms of sales and in terms of the reception. I think people really love these games. But in terms of the technology, I'm not seeing anything that's like hugely sticking out to me at this point, outside of saying, it looks good. It's perfectly cromulent, as you might say.
And in the background, the thing that I've just played Avatar, so I'm like, my eyes are like completely ruined as a result. But like looking at the background rendering when they show off that large like crescent rock formation in the background, all I could think is like, it needs better shadow detail there. Like that's what I kept thinking. Like I was like, oh man, the distance shadows don't hold up nearly as much as they should. Like for this trailer, I also saw some slight hallmarks of RE here. So I'm going to presume it is, and the fact that Monster Hunter games, at least since they dropped MT Framework, have been RE. So And also art style wise, they showed up. It's a little bit unfortunate that they showed off this biome that it is in, because it is barren and it is lifeless, and it's not supposed to be vibrant and interesting looking necessarily. It's supposed to communicate a different mood, but it also then, as a result, doesn't lead to me being super psyched about it, because, it's hard to visually parse because it's mostly monotone in terms of color. It's like kind of like earthy. So I don't have too much to say about it. I hope we could see more of it soon enough. But this is also a number 2025 game, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of stuff being shown off now is actually going to be pretty far in the future. Yeah, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that they literally went for a barren, featureless desert to show this. But I guess it did put the emphasis on the monsters themselves and the sheer volume of them that they're punting around here. But yeah, again, it's teaser central here. Not much going on, but certainly enough to pique the interest and make you want to see more, which I guess is the whole point of it, really.
Yeah.
Not too much more, again, that we can add to this one. But obviously we'll be following it with interest. And just generally, the continuing evolution of the RE engine and the disclosure that Capcom are doing around it, I think is really, really interesting. There's possibly, isn't there like the hint that they might be looking to license it to other people?
It is, yeah. That's why they did those outward-facing presentations, and I think it would be great actually, because in terms of performance, usually at least, that's one thing that is always pretty good in most of the titles on console. So
yeah, there has been the sense that the Capcom runs a really tight ship, right? And resources are very judiciously deployed in terms of the tech. And I'm behind this idea of them actually licensing it if it means they can actually invest more into the engine and just push it even further, because it's already highly competent. And, if you consider, the likely development effort that's gone into that engine compared to, say, Unreal or Unity, it's punching well above its weight, I'd say.
Oh, for sure. My goodness. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on and let's discuss the next thing that caught our eye. Okay, so there were some rumors before the TGAs that a new Arcane Studios game would be revealed, and so it came to be. But I don't think too many people could have guessed that it would be a Marvel Studios collaboration, and it's Blade, the Vampire Hunter. And wow, really interesting, different looking trailer. Again, not much given away, but certainly very stylistic from a rendering perspective. I'm going to go to you, Alex, on this one.
Yeah, from a rendering perspective here, I'm going to say I don't know if it's actually real time, because I look at the history of the engines that they've used. It's primarily Void and Leon, and that one they've used that Void engine for a while since Dishonored, Deathloop, and they've upgraded it, and I don't think they would dump it for their next title. But here they showed off like in this trailer, which I don't think was real time, like I'm gonna say, it had like hallmarks of things where couldn't see any geometry edges on a lot of things, on anything actually. And the indirect lighting, to unless they upgraded Void or they switched to UE5, I almost want to say like this is not real time, but that's a shame if that is the truth of it. But I think it's great because they're showing off one, Blade being in Paris, which is I'm so grateful when a game doesn't take place in New York, because every game does, and it's awesome to see different world locations with their own history and language. It's incredible, and I would love to see what they do with that, especially considering they said it is not some open world game or something. It's not going to be like Redfall or whatever. It's going to be a single player action game with Arcane styling. And that's going to mean most likely, like a high emphasis on like how you interact with the AI, multiple ridiculous user thought out paths to complete objectives. That's what they do there, and they do very, very well. And then you apply it to this world of what is essentially like some sort of vampire hunter, who's just really cool. And I can't wait to see what they do with it as a result. Rendering things that they think they're going to carry over to the trailer to whenever we see what is presumably going to be in-game graphics is, it seems like any gradient of lighting has comic book style like printing errors in it. Like, how you see like the punctual printing ink there, like you see in a comic book. I kind of like that, and I would like to see more of that in games too, because it's moved. Films ever since those like Spider-Verse movies came out, a lot of CG has been going back to the drawing board of actually trying to maintain an animated look to things that isn't just perfectly smooth and like perfectly path trace rendered. They'll still use path tracing, but it'll be then painted over, or etc. They'll actually make individual poses for frames that snap, things like that. I'd like to see more of that in games, and this is a perfect opportunity for them to do it. Deathloop was already a little bit stylized in a great way, so them continuing that tradition into this would be awesome. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Oliver, I mean, it's a really exciting opportunity here, which is that, obviously there's been a big bunch of superhero games, and, that a formula has been established, right? But, you throw Arcane into the mix and all bets are off.
Yeah, I think this seems like kind of the natural counterpart to something like the Insomniac Wolverine game or the Insomniac Spider-Man games. I mean, it literally is the same licensor of the IP.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Arcane seems like an interesting fit. I mean, I hope they do something interesting with it outside of the typical superhero type action titles. I'm sure they will, and certainly from all the press surrounding this title so far, that sounds like they will. The visuals look absolutely stunning. Like, I love what they've done with the art. But like Alex said, I don't think it's real time. I hope it turns out well, and I hope it doesn't turn out like Arcane's other exploration with non-Arcane genre titles.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at least I think what we can say here is that they are at least setting out their stall in terms of the style to expect from a visual perspective, right? Because they want to say that this is going to be different. I think they did a great job with that. Obviously, though, in terms of what you're actually going to do in the game, we just have no idea at this point. Again, just a tease, just an announcement. But interesting nonetheless. And it was great to see a developer like Arcane that hasn't had the best of years finish it with a real high point, I think, which is pretty awesome. Okay, well, let's move on to the next thing that caught our eye, which is Light No Fire. Now, Sean Murray from Hello Games joined Jeff Keighley on the stage. There's kind of like a retrospective of everything that happened with No Man's Sky over the years. And I think this really was an interesting way to start off that segment, simply because No Man's Sky itself is a game with a kind of checkered history. It's a game that actually came good over the years, continued investment from the developer. It's just got better and better over the years. It's a completely different game now to well, first of all, what was released, but secondly, what was actually announced back in the day. Mm-hmm. And then we had this really interesting transition to, okay, we've done the universe. We've done the universe, we've done the galaxy, now we're going to do the Earth. And it's kind of like a fantasy representation of the Earth, viewed through the lens of Hello Games and what seems to be their procedural systems. We did actually see a fair bit of footage of the game, but what you actually do in it, who knows? Oliver, what do you make of it?
What I think is interesting about this trailer, relative to what you see from a game like No Man's Sky, is that you actually do have like a really sculpted world, not like the kind of No Man's Sky style proc gen, which is maybe a little bit more obviously procedurally generated. This looks like plausibly it could be some kind of Skyrim style game that is actually a handcrafted experience, or at least, just examining the skyline, you're not obviously seeing something that's generated by a computer, which is a great credit to them. So I think the visuals look pretty good. It's obviously based on procedural generation. Some people are not huge fans of that. I do like the idea of a more RPG style effort from Hello Games. And I also like the idea of an RPG with infinite content. That sounds like a very cool idea. And I also like the idea that they're not going to try to do something with as wide of a scope as No Man's Sky, which I think is probably better for the overall consistency and the quality of the experience. So from what we've seen so far, I think it looks interesting, but like you said, it's kind of hard to make out exactly what this will be. It does look like maybe there's some co-op elements to it. At least there's a lot of cooperative gameplay with some kind of allied player or non-player character in this trailer. So that would seem
they set their stall straight away, which is to say multiplayer.
Oh, right.
That was one of the first captions that comes up.
Right.
But yeah, fascinating stuff. Alex?
Just to talk about why I think Oliver sees what he sees is because with No Man's Sky, you have like an entire planet that is mostly a single biome, and it is like a random seed. It is.
Yeah.
It's very obviously so, and it can obviously produce interesting looks in its own right. It's cool, but it has that look. And as soon as you go to dedicated a single planet, at least, it could also be multiple, but just also artist driven, is that you'll have one predefined geography most likely, and then like rule based placement and scattering of like different assets, and you'll get actually much more natural formations than you get from just like a sphere that has like a random height map on it. So like I'm very happy to see that, because it creates one, I think, just a more compelling looking world. And presumably with the different biomes that are shown off in the trailer, it'll have a great deal of variety in it. That is always great to see. I think this is trying to capture the same feeling. I covered Valheim like 2 years ago now, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And it's like that, like survival co-op crafting, because the person in the trailer, like they run up, and I swear they ran to a tree with an axe. They don't show them cutting it, I don't think, but like that's definitely in there. And there's like a house that's being assembled, probably because at night, if you've ever played Terraria or if you ever played Minecraft, like things get a little bit scarier at night. You need light and warmth, and you need to be sheltered. So I think it's going to try and capture that all within the fantasy realm of whatever dungeons that exist in the world, much like they exist in all these other games that I just mentioned. There's like dungeon environments that are scattered throughout caves usually. I think it's going to be going for that, and I think that is going to be compelling in its own right for a lot of people who enjoy those games. I've had fun with games like that in the past, so I can really see it. Rendering wise, it looked a lot like things we saw in No Man's Sky's like later updates in terms of rendering, like all the motion blur, all like the clouds, the way they look. A lot of that was there, and so I don't really see anything new technologically here other than the way scattering is done. But I saw like screen space reflections, for example, when the dragon flying thing is going over the lake. So I'm curious to see where they also throw it out, which platforms. Will this be a Switch 2 title? It seems like it would be a great fit for that system, like in terms of what you do, play with your friends, child friendly. I would like to know.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's an interesting sort of distinction when you sort of talk about procedural generation, which is to say that, game worlds are now so large that the concept of artists actually placing individual bushes going down to that level, it's a thing of the past. And, you look at titles like, for example, Horizon Zero Dawn, Forbidden West, they actually just do some really clever procedural generation. For example, the shape of boulders in a river. They can say, well, this river is like 10,000 years old, and the shape of the boulder could be defined by erosion to the boulder over that time period. That's the kind of crazy stuff that procedural generation just can do automatically for you as part of an artist-driven pipeline. So this does look a bit more crafted, shall we say, than No Man's Sky. And I think there is a big, as you said, Alex, it's a big sort of differentiation between procedural generation as the entire basis of the aesthetic versus procedural generation as a part of a tool. I guess it also, going back to like Skyrim, that game was like 3 gigs, and obviously the size of that map, there's going to be procedural generation involved to the nines. Yeah, but Hello Games, they've total rehabilitation of their reputation based on continued support and free updates for No Man's Sky, and the game just has gone from strength to strength. And well, what can I say? I can't wait to see what they're doing with this one, because it's certainly a really strong introduction, I think. And it's great also to see that they're actually doing something that's very, very different to No Man's Sky, conceptually, artistically. Really, really fascinating stuff. And this is, what we're seeing here apparently is the result of 5 years of development already. So yeah, I mean, looking really, really impressive. But let's move on. I guess we should just sort of round up by taking a look at some of the other games that caught our attention in terms of the trailers. I guess we should kick off with Black Myth Wukong, which is a game that's well, again, we've seen presentations of this going back years, but they've always looked really, really impressive. And actually, Alex, one of the big regrets I have about Gamescom this year is that we missed that.
We didn't see it. Yeah.
We didn't see that demo, which everybody was raving about. Yeah. New trailer here. Mm-hmm. What do you reckon?
It's looking great. I'm always impressed with the designs of everything. How just... I don't know if it is actually due to the fact that it's based on so well on the myth, but like everything is just like so wacky, and it actually sets off my uncanny feeling usually, like all the characters. They look like, like you'd imagine for something that is like a demon or an immortal, like local god. It's like just like creepy and like just doesn't care about like anything. It just, everything in the trailer looked really creepy, was actually what I thought, in a good way, because you're playing, like the world is supposed to be daunting. It's supposed to be like a challenge for your character, much like how it is in Dark Souls games. And this seems to be taking that Dark Souls gameplay formula to a degree here. And I loved all of that in the trailer. Graphically, we know that since then, they've originally started on UE4 and then migrated to UE5, integrated a lot of that. And they've announced over the years that they're going to be just like pushing, in the release, they're going to be pushing things like DLSS 3 frame gen, presumably FSR, pushing a lot of extra ray tracing effects above, I think, what standard Unreal does. For that release on PC. They've really seemed like a hardcore focused team. And was the Gamescom demo on PC or was it on Xbox?
I think it was PC.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I remember someone saying that they saw a version of the game running on console and it also looked really good.
Okay. Well,
so I think it's going to be a visually excellent title. One thing about this trailer, though, is you combine YouTube with what is probably not the best upload, and you combine it with a lot of motion blur and super fast camera movements. Like the camera movements here were nuts. They were just everywhere. And one thing that I try and do, and people sometimes complain about it underneath the videos, is that like I'm moving the camera slowly in the video. Is the game really this slow? And I'm not doing that because I play the game that way. I play the game with a mouse and keyboard and it looks much more erratic. And it doesn't show up well on YouTube because of compression. So what I do to show off things is I move the camera slowly if I move it at all. And pans are very, very gradual. So that allows people to appreciate the detail and compression to be favorable to it. Here, though, if you were to pause any one of these frames when Wukong or the Monkey King or whatever his name is like flying through the air and he's being tossed around, you'll look at trash. That, it looks like trash. And that's what most of the trailer as a result looks like. And that's a shame because it obviously looks really, really good. So,
I mean, maybe we should just have a quick discussion about compression because, basically the way compression works is it takes information from prior frames and even future frames to construct the current one, right? And the more variation there is between those frames, the harder it is to compress, and therefore the more artifacts you get. So basically, games that are typically slower paced in nature retain more of their detail. So I actually think when it comes to doing these kind of assets, you can do this, amazing sort of super fast, quick cut trailer. But if your intended medium is YouTube, you've got to remember that you've got like highly limited bandwidth, and it's going to look bad. It's usually stuff like racing games that are typically affected the worst because there's so much movement from frame to frame.
Right.
But in this one with all those crazy movements going on, it's a very similar thing.
Yeah.
But going back to the game, Oliver, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, there's a ton of variety in the environment here, which I love to see. Like, it's clearly a game with great production values. I also think the designs are very interesting. I think it's kind of cool because we don't really see a lot of Chinese art in games or games that are set in historical China, anything like that. Lots of Japan in games, but not so much China. So this is very different. And I think it's doing some very interesting things just in terms of presenting a unique world that you actually want to explore, showing you things you haven't seen before, telling you a story that maybe is based on, on a novel, based on historical material, but is actually a new story in the world of games, a relatively new story in the world of games. So I think that's interesting. It certainly looks very unique.
Excellent. Okay, and let's move on to actually, Oliver, I'm going to stay with you for this because new Persona.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the runtime of the trailer. It's at 1 minute 49, which suggests that Jeff is interested in it.
Yeah.
There's a bit more showing of it, a bit more airtime given to it. And you're a fan of this series.
Yeah. So I kind of just wanted to highlight two games kind of real quick, which is Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor Refantazio. Persona 3 Reload is coming out pretty soon, I think on February 2nd. And I think there are a lot of really things that it's doing really well. Like I love the character designs. I love the animations. I love the UI. It's using UE4, so you get all that nice post-processing as well. It's obviously not new to have motion blur depth of field in a game, but it's certainly new to Atlas. So that's pretty cool. The weird thing is there's like almost no attempt to display indirect lighting, like either through baked lighting or through AO or through drawing it into like the texture art. So the environments look weirdly flat. Personally, I kind of wonder if maybe this is best played on PC and injecting SSAO yourself. I kind of think that might be preferable.
Right. Yeah.
And then there's Metaphor Refantazio, which I think looks like really exciting as a game. Love the UI designs, great characters, great battle sequences. No anti-aliasing whatsoever. So, and it's a very high contrast art style that really emphasizes those hard edges. I counted roughly 1584p on one edge, which was trivially easy to count because it was not anti-aliased.
No anti-alias.
Exactly. But on the plus side, there is some decent baked lighting. The environmental art looks decent. And I kind of wonder actually if they're using an evolution of the in-house technology that they developed for Persona 5, because a lot in this trailer reminds you of Persona 5, especially the way the environmental art looks. And it would jibe with the general lack of post-processing in the image, which is maybe a bit of a telltale they're not using Unreal here.
Right.
So, so I think two games with their own unique issues, neither one pushing the state of the art. I'm excited for both, but I think there are some small things that Atlas could probably do that would improve the look of these games without maybe incurring a huge development effort. That's a lot, I'd say.
I think we also wanted to talk about Skull and Bones, which is has been sort of languishing in. I'm not sure it's development hell, but they haven't really produced much over the years, and it's been delayed and delayed and delayed. And we actually got a trailer and an announcement that it is coming, right?
Indeed.
Right?
February, right? So this one's interesting.
Looks great. The trailer looks great. As to whether it's real time, I don't know, but it certainly looks good.
It looks good. This is one where I'm always so interested in it because I swear, I don't even know if this is NDA breaking, but I swear did we ever get like the opportunity to start review? Like, did we get contact for it? Am I making this up? I don't know.
John has got some footage.
That's what it is. John has some footage of this game from like
years ago.
From like, I don't know. It's like half a decade ago at this point almost. And he's playing. It's like playing it. We gotta when this game comes out, we have to do like a comparison between that footage and what the game is, because it's almost like Beyond Good and Evil level of it's not that long. But it's so long between when the game has like been started to be talked about and like what it is. Like the origins of this game are as a result of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, right?
Yeah. Which is like 2013.
Yeah, so like this is incredibly ancient in video game launch terms. So this is cool to see what ends up happening. From what I know, the PC version uses RTX GI. There was originally press releases about that before it was going to come out, like 2 years ago or something like that. So I presume that's all still there for the final release. And yeah, this is one that would be great to cover on PC as a result of that. In terms of the game vibe, if it's got really fun co-op, I'm down for doing some co-op shenanigans with John and
shenanigans
even buffoonery,
hijinks,
wacky hijinks.
Yeah, I find it a little bit wild that after all this time, and I would say development purgatory, because it just sitting there. That this actually, to me, I watched a little bit of they published a gameplay trailer separately as well, and it looks very similar to Assassin's Creed 4 and Assassin's Creed Rogue in those ship segments, because it's like you control a ship captain, and when you're in port, you kind of control that character individually. When you're on the ship, you control the ship as kind of like a monolith, like a sea tank or something. You control the ship completely. And that is very, very similar to the gameplay design that we saw in Assassin's Creed 4, which obviously that makes sense, right? Work on a concept that already works well that people like. But why did that need to take 10 years? And why did they need to juggle around all these different designs? And they have co-op in there, 3-player co-op, it says, up to 3 players, which is interesting. But like, is this really an idea that needed that much time in the oven, that much baking, that much rebooting? It just seems a little bit bizarre to me, but I don't know. Hopefully it comes out well. Hopefully it arrives in February, because I think this game was penciled in for late last year, wasn't it? And then it got pushed, and it's been pushed quite a few times.
It looks as though February the 16th, which is my brother's birthday.
Okay.
Which you'll have no interest in whatsoever. Just a sort of minor PS here. Skull and Bones, a Ubisoft original. Surely it's Anne.
Yeah, right?
What's going on there?
Push it back to fix that, I think.
Yes.
Yes. It needs another year of development for that grammatical error.
Development. Well, I think, we always enjoy doing these sort of co-op videos. I think we want to do one for Avatar, which has got cross-play co-op.
Yeah, that'd be
so maybe
crazy.
we should do that. But what I have noticed is that when we do multiplayer videos, they don't do very well.
Yeah.
Possibly because you're spending so much time looking at toilets.
Toilets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes.
Are there any toilets in this one? I guess we'll find out February the 16th. But that's it. But that's all we've really got to say about the TGAs in terms of the game reveals there. And I think, Jeff was kind of downplaying the world premiere. But, there was some interesting stuff in there, even if it was sort of lacking in terms of overall illumination, in terms of details and gameplay. But, even so, I do think they need to sort out the transparency, though. It's weird not knowing what you're looking at any given point. Microsoft have made strides there. Sony have pretty much got it all sorted. So, this is where we need all the major events to basically tell us what we're actually seeing.
Yeah.
On another note, it's kind of weird to me that there's, an awards ceremony has new product announcements in it. Can you imagine that happening in like the Oscars? Best Picture, and okay, here's a trailer for the new Spider-Man movie coming out next year. kind of a bit odd, and I guess it gets the audience excited and it increases the viewing figures somewhat. But you're not talking about the awards ultimately. Kind of a bit strange. So it's been a bit of a challenging week for us. Lots going on, and we've got to say though, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. Absolutely amazing game. Alex, your PC sort of technology showcase video is already out now, and I think we wanted to get some information out there about the console versions. Tom is going to be handling that. He's already taking a look at that right now. But I think you and I have played the console versions, right, Oliver? You've had a bit go on there. And I think this is really, really good, because I was looking at Alex's video, which was like 4090 footage at what we thought was max settings until they actually came out with max settings, which takes it still further. But what we're seeing here is really impressive scalability of the engine down to much more modest levels of GPU and CPU horsepower. So what system did you play on? PS5?
I played on Series X.
Oh, okay,
so you have
cool.
the full spectrum of units.
And thoughts?
It's beautiful. It's really stunning. It's really stunning. It feels like such a good match for those movies. I mean, the exteriors look incredible. The interiors look really, really good. It's very Crysis, like Alex said that in his review. I completely concur. I actually beat Crysis 3 recently again. I replayed it on my Nintendo Switch, which is actually a pretty decent port as it happens.
The port is exceptional.
That's a good port, yeah.
It's quite good. Yeah. And I mean, it reminds me a lot of that, especially like the section in Crysis 3 where you're going over the dam. Like you see a lot of that kind of areas in the game.
Right.
I don't think I've ever seen a game with half as much foliage before. Like, it's ridiculous how much they're pushing on screen. And I think the other thing that I'm really impressed about is the commitment to ray tracing. You have 2 ray traced effects in this title, RTGI and RT reflections. And that's true in the 30 FPS quality mode and the 60 FPS performance mode, which the 60 FPS performance mode, to my eyes, it was dropping some frames, but it's come a lot closer to 60 FPS than you might think for a title that's pushing that much advanced rendering technology with this much ray tracing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I played on PlayStation 5 and Series S, and PlayStation 5 seems to be very, very similar to what you're talking about with the Series X, as you might imagine. And I'm just really surprised at how well it holds up overall. Actually, thinking about it, let me just bring up my Slack here, because Tom is looking at the game as we speak.
Right.
And he did supply the pixel counts for the Series X and the PlayStation 5. They appear to be the same. So the quality mode, which is targeting 30 frames per second, it's a dynamic resolution range between 1296p and 1800p. Mm-hmm. And the performance mode, which is targeting 60, it can be a little bit variable, but I don't know if you would concur on this, Oliver, but it seems to sit well within the VRR window. So if you've got a VRR display, it should be happy days. But even without, it's creditable. The resolution range there seems to be 864p, 40% of 4K, up to 1260p, 58% of 4K. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you do get a great deal more clarity on the 30 FPS mode, but the 60 FPS performance mode. This is another thing which I think is a pretty decent takeaway, is that the FSR2 implementation in the console versions at least, and I think it's been lauded on PC, it's actually pretty good, I think, in terms of detail retention. Mm-hmm. So any thoughts on that, Oliver? Did you concur with that one?
I mostly concur. I mean, on Series S, I played it a bit on Series S.
Great.
It does have more visible breakup. Like I was seeing a little bit of that fizzle a little bit more, whereas on the other consoles I had to like get up close to the screen to see it. On Series S I could see it from a normal viewing distance. But that console has the full feature set at 30 FPS, albeit, but still very impressive. One thing I'm really impressed by too is that like the PC code, from what I can see, it is more advanced. Obviously it's more advanced. They're piling on some additional features there. They're piling on additional settings. But it feels like mostly iterative advancements over the console code. I don't know if you'd agree there, Alex, but like the console
I haven't
code,
even loaded up the consoles yet.
So I suppose so. But the console
we do have the console equivalent settings, though.
It's not like, for instance, Alan Wake 2, where I felt like, man, console owners are kind of missing out a little bit here. I mean, it's a great looking game, but it's missing a little bit. It kind of feels like, hey, console owners, you're getting a great version of this game, and PC owners get to take it iteratively to like the next level, but not revolutionarily to the next level. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but,
I haven't seen it up close, but that's based upon what the screenshots I've seen. It didn't look like a different game or something like that. It looked good, and everything you're saying about the foliage, if that is panning out on consoles, then that's like one of the other than the detail up close, but the fact that you get like this super dense foliage like far into the distance away from the camera, and if that holds up just as well like subjectively on the consoles, then you're getting like the same game. Mm-hmm. I think it's all going to be down to like the precision of effects, like the ray trace reflections, the ray trace GI, presumably the cloud rendering. I don't imagine it's using like the max settings, like all these things that you imagine to get the performance up. And as far as I know, on the quality mode, I did talk with them. This should also be coming out at some point. I'm going to be editing it today after I finish this video. I'm going to be editing the transcription to an interview I did with two people who worked heavily in the tech development for the game. And they described there that the quality mode in the games, along with pushing up resolution, should be pushing up some quality CVARs as well too. Mm-hmm, so it should look better in other aspects. I'd imagine some of those are like related to like things like shadow quality. That's usually a thing people turn down when they try and get 60 FPS. So I don't know off the top of my head at the moment, but awesome looking game. I am very proud of everything they've created, and it makes me really happy because I see occasionally comments like, how can anyone compete with Unreal Engine 5? And like, to me, this is like, at least since we haven't seen any of the super big, expensive Unreal Engine 5 games come out necessarily, this is like that level. And it's also doing it in a way where I feel like it's offering a way better PC version than you'd see in most Unreal Engine 5 games. So I'm like really happy with the tech as a result. Like, it's really rare that you get to see such a good looking game run as well as this one does without issue. Mm-hmm. And if that's translating over to the consoles, that is sick. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I played it for a couple of hours on PlayStation 5 and Series S, and I don't think you'll be disappointed with it. It just looks so packed full of detail, and it looks cutting edge. I mean, personally, I don't know how to say this, but, looking at some of the Unreal Engine 5 games, some of the cutbacks required to use these cutting edge features arguably have been a bit too harsh. I guess the classic example is Immortals of Avium. It's typically when the UE5 games are targeting 60 frames per second. Something's kind of got to give when you're using that level of technology. And, by extension, there's the sense that, well, can the consoles handle it? Are they powerful enough? But then you go to look at Avatar, and the 30 FPS mode looks fantastic. Really does look phenomenally good. The caveat, I think, to that is that the motion blur isn't great. So 30 FPS looks very, very jarring compared to 60. But the point is the 60 FPS mode is very, very viable and looks great as well. And it's kind of given me a lot more faith in terms of the consoles. And more generally, I've been thinking about going back to like the Xbox 360 era, 2007, a couple of years after the launch, where the developers really started to get to grips with the new hardware. I kind of had shades of that feeling here as well, where, if we'd gone back to 2020 and we'd seen this running on a Series X or PlayStation 5, we'd have been completely blown away and possibly not believing that it was actually running on a Series X or PlayStation 5. But here we are a few years later, and they're finally getting to grips with the hardware. The game looks phenomenal, and I'd urge you to check it out because it just looks and plays great.
Yeah.
In fact, if you haven't looked at Alex's technology video, please do, because yes, that is high-end PC, but the core of the experience and the density is there on the consoles, and it looks terrific. And that's what I've got to say about Avatar. Now let's move on to supporter Q&A. This is the part of the show where we, every week on our Patreon, we ask our supporters to come up with, topic suggestions for inclusion in the direct and questions, any questions they might have. We get a big bunch, and we can't answer all of them. Some of them require a great deal of research, but we choose the ones that we're best equipped to answer. And let's kick off this week. Scrolling to the right part of the document, with this one from Julian Schreiter. Hey GF, I recently watched one of your old videos on pixel counting and thought it was fascinating stuff. I was wondering how you guys factoring upscaling on consoles with FSR and TSR. Are the stair steps rendered for the rendered resolution or the upscaled resolution? If so, how do you measure the output of the upscaled image? Yes, this was a video we did way back in the day where this whole process was a lot simpler because, upscaling wasn't really a thing, and TAA, which also causes issues, was kind of in its infancy. Oliver, would you care to tackle this one? Because the answer is actually it's a lot more difficult.
Well, yeah. So I guess to answer the question, basically you need to measure both in some fashion. To find the internal resolution, you'll need to break the image reconstruction, or TAA or whatever. You'll need to break it. So to do that, you'll whip the camera around. If there's, if you can get the motion blur off, whipping the camera around will work. Or counting frames on camera cuts, which typically will not have anti-aliasing treatment in these titles. Or just look for parts of the image that rapidly change in lighting, or sometimes certain elements won't have motion blur applied to them in a game with motion blur. Things like this. That's how you see the internal resolution. For the output resolution, sometimes it's possible to count UI elements. Sometimes it's possible to count the final resolution of the image. Usually what I'll do, if I can't figure it out, is I will just load up the PC version, capture a bunch of the game running at different resolutions, compare that to consoles, and get some idea, right? But I guess in general, just as a general matter, I think resolution questions are not as important nearly as they used to be. We're looking at pretty high resolutions across games, especially internal resolutions, not too relevant. I think, to me, the key questions when evaluating a console game are, is it acceptably sharp given the typical viewing distance people will be from their displays? And is there much visible breakup in the image on geometric elements, right? Those would be the key concerns. So, yeah, basically you have to measure both. It's hard and getting harder. And Yeah, that's just all there is to it, really.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on this one, Alex? I mean, Oliver was talking there about, distance from the screen, which I think is quite interesting because there's a perception in the PC space when dealing with, say, DLSS that, 1080p, you've got to be on DLSS quality, 1440p, DLSS balanced is okay, 4K DLSS performance mode kind of works out, typically. But that's with a very different viewing distance. You're kind of right in front of the screen, typically, with PC gaming, right? So the quality threshold, I'd argue, goes up, that requires that kind of delineation of mode to resolution.
Right. Yeah, it's all about how many pixels you see per arc second of your vision. And that is very different on PC. You said those preset mode names, Rich, for the various things, but most people, not most people, but I read often online, people are like, I only use quality mode. If I even do it, I can't even deal with quality mode. I also read it's fake frames. I also read that. So, I mean, it's all subjective to a degree, which is why you have to explain the subjective element in the video. Like when I do point out any sort of image quality aspect, I'm trying to say that this is persisting over multiple frames for a large part of a frame, so you notice it. There's no reason to look at the minutia if it doesn't have a macro effect. In regards to the what Oliver said, it's all those things I would try and do myself. And the one thing that's really hard, I think, about this is that if you're trying to get the end pixel count of whatever the game's output value is, which it's not easy to get, like, because if you think about it, these upscalers are accumulating anti-aliasing up to the output resolution. So you're seeing anti-aliased frames and seeing the real pixels of that anti-aliased frames. You're not going to see ones anyway that are raw usually. That wouldn't make sense. It's very hard. And you also have the issue where in games, especially console games, where you can have post-processing done at a very different resolution than the internal resolution, and that you'll be getting like a 540p count or a 480p count, and you're like, this must be the motion blur resolution or something. So you're counting something else entirely. Yeah, it's hard. Or the transparency resolution is often very low in games.
It's quite interesting to go back to the original video where Tom basically did an explainer for how we did it. And I thought, back in the day that this was a really interesting example in transparency, and the data, the information, the technique was there on like the Beyond 3D forums back in the day. So it was nice to be able to show our workings, so to speak. But it is 10 times more difficult these days simply to find an untreated edge that would give you some idea of the resolution. And then, as you say, Alex, there can be all manner of factors added in that would also influence the output resolution of that particular edge. And I almost feel in a way that, by producing that kind of video, which explains in a sort of blow by blow manner how to do pixel counting, that it's kind of like incomplete now. And it actually leads to a lot of erroneous pixel counts from various people.
Would you love to do an update where we talk about how hard it is now? I mean, that would be a fun video. Almost, we could take like false positives and examples and say like why this isn't great.
That would be really interesting. Yeah, maybe we should do it because it's turned into, I wouldn't say it's an art form. It's just turned into a pain in the ass, basically. Isn't it? And there is, on a sort of more holistic level, you're quite right, Alex, with the inclusion of accumulation of anti-aliased images. It's, when you say something is 1440p, it's actually really difficult to apply any kind of rational meaning to that.
Yeah. It's a number. It's a number.
It's a number. Yeah. And we've tried a lot of things. We've looked into like clarity sort of metrics. A lot of clever people have helped us out to try and overcome the pixel counting thing. And it is the case that it's got to be a subjective analysis at the end of the day based on what you think and how the artifacts manifest themselves. Because, programmatically assessing image quality just isn't working for us. And as I said, we've had some very clever people helping us on that. But with that, Let's move on to our next question. This one from Perfect_Organism. I've been playing some games that lean heavy into physics recently. Very different games, mind you. Katamari, Damacy, and Prey 2018. I've always sort of leaned into the argument that the weak CPU in last-gen consoles is the reason that physics took a backseat in recent games, but I'm beginning to think that it isn't really true. With those two games and the recent Zelda pushing physics to the forefront on quote-unquote weak hardware, seems that this is an intentional design decision. What do you think leads to physics as a gameplay element to be pushed into the background in modern games? Thoughts, Oliver?
Yeah, I do think that it's been pushed to the side intentionally, mostly because physics seem very hard to work with, I imagine. You have to bound physics in all kinds of ways and constrain them, and it's really hard to get them to react in a predictable and true-to-life manner, I think, especially when they're for gameplay-critical elements. Some of the best physics-based gameplay is in older titles, like Half-Life 2, though if you go back to that title, the physics aren't especially realistic, but they're predictable and they work for that title.
Yeah, Crysis, of course.
Yeah,
Crysis is another example.
And I think also if you look at Zelda, because Zelda is an interesting example, it's doing a lot of great physics stuff, and I really like Tears of the Kingdom quite a lot, but it's not pushing like a ton of physicalized objects at once. Like in my gameplay, whenever I tried to play with too many objects and play with physics, the frame rate just crashed. So it's doing great stuff with physics, but it's not doing like a lot of really number crunchy stuff with tons of physics objects at once. I think there is a distinction there when we talk about like a game that uses physics for gameplay versus a game that has just tons of physics everywhere, right?
Right. That's a good distinction. I was about to say the exact same thing. Like what I see in Tears of the Kingdom reminds me a lot of things that people were doing in Gary's mod back in the day, if you've ever played Gary's mod, where you can attach like a force multiplier to something, and then all of a sudden it can move forward, or you can like stack a few things and they'll fall down. Nothing too intense that we haven't seen beyond the Xbox 360 PS3 generation, which is interesting why they mentioned Katamari Damacy, or I'll go back to Red Faction Guerrilla, or just a lot of the old PS3 360 era did a lot of this. And I think the author is correct. I think CPU probably didn't help the situation, definitely for a lot of titles. When they wanted to do something, they would be like, man, maybe we can't. But also there's just extreme changes in design that Oliver mentions there. Like it's a lot easier to make something much more predictable and less computationally complex when you can do it in a scripted manner. And maybe it also looks better to a number of people. Based upon the hardware constraints. So yeah, it's style too. Like games changed in style radically over that Xbox 360 PS3 generation. They were usually a lot smaller scale and less polished in the beginning, and then they got a lot larger and much more polished while being maybe less ambitious in certain aspects towards the end.
Okay, fair enough. And with that, let's move on to the next question. This one from Chris Toffin, I think. Is the username here. Regarding ray reconstruction and full ray tracing being added to Call of Duty, do you think this is them testing the waters for implementing ray tracing back into the engine? I've been playing through Cyberpunk Ray Tracing Overdrive, and I can't help but constantly think about how nice zombies would look with full ray tracing. So yeah, to put this question into context, this is a really interesting and somewhat bizarre development that happened with Call of Duty this week, where the headline was, whoa, full path tracing coming to Call of Duty, which is like, yay. And then it's like the menu screens and the shooting range, and it's like Alex, just to make this must have required some degree of developmental input that is not insignificant, and yet
huge,
here we are
actually. It's a huge difference, yeah.
Yes. So what do you think's going on here? Because it is utterly bizarre, isn't it?
It is definitely a test bed. Like, there's no reason to spend all this time and effort to add. You're ripping out the entire lighting system and putting in a different one that you just don't transplant from one game to another. It's probably game-specific aspects to it. Yeah, they're probably doing it because it's going to be part of the IW engine in the future on PC. But right now, because of the timelines, most likely it did not at all align for releasing whatever their campaign was. It doesn't align for their multiplayer ambitions because you'd have completely different lighting for the world there. But I could totally imagine next year's presuming it's using the same engine, or are we going back to Are we going back to Treyarch next year?
Well, this is the thing, right? Because in a direct recently, I was talking about Treyarch having their own technology, but I think somebody pulled me up on that and said that Treyarch is moving on to the same sort of technology platform.
Interesting.
I haven't found out whether that's true or not, but maybe it is. But even so, it's. I think next year could be possibly optimistic. I think
maybe it is.
I think the big issue here is conformity in multiplayer, right? Because the whole lighting model and therefore the gameplay mechanics would change massively, surely. And in Call of Duty, they're still supporting the PS4, I reckon, by next year. It could be some sort of branching off. It's got to happen at some point, you'd think.
Yeah.
And even so, you'd be branching off PC from other PCs and from consoles, because even the current generation consoles aren't going to be doing anything quite like this, which makes this whole endeavor
very interesting.
but also very bizarre as well.
I wish I could have loaded it up. That's the one thing with the Avatar.
Yeah, we wanted to take a look at
it up.
We've had a really tough week.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because we're seeing a technological convergence this generation around solving long-standing lighting problems in games using an application of ray tracing. And I would be very surprised if Activision, Blizzard, King, Microsoft doesn't want to keep pushing graphical boundaries with Call of Duty and continue to push the state-of-the-art in rendering tech. That would be very surprising to me. It is weird that after Black Ops Cold War, we haven't really seen RT in the engine, but I have to imagine it's going to come back, especially when last-gen consoles get dropped. It's got to come back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's certainly an interesting experiment, and I guess we've got to get some eyes-on time with it to maybe get a better understanding of what's going on there, but it's certainly a very, very curious development. But let's move on to the next question. This one from Steve Burkmose, I think. Hey DF, in the light of game preservation, should the console manufacturers release a jailbreak patch for 2 to 3 generation old consoles? Thanks. I think there's a lot of issues with game preservation on older machines, which has been overcome, frankly, by piracy and hacks. For example, the Wii U, a lot of that is officially gone now because the eShop is, if it's not gone, it's going.
It's gone.
And
it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah. So there are genuine issues there that could be resolved by some sort of jailbreak patch. But Oliver, this does seem like there's too many potential outliers and exceptions that would stop it from happening, and also it would require buy-in from basically every third-party manufacturer. Really.
Yeah, I do wish that once you take a console's online features offline, that there should be some obligation somehow to support that console through preservation. I have no idea what that would look like. Maybe John could answer what he would like. I don't know that jailbreaking is the appropriate solution. There's there are a lot of hurdles, right? But there's got to be something there. Like, it makes me a little bit annoyed that like the 360 online is going offline and then
right. That makes me sad.
Yeah, just upsetting. But I don't know.
Yeah, the whole licensing thing is would be the thing that gets in the way of this. But it's like when we were talking about that Half-Life 60 FPS thing last week. I really wanted to try it on Series S, right? Because it's a lovely little machine, and in theory it should have been running those games at 1440p 60. Happy days. And I tried to buy the game on the digital store and I couldn't. And there's no reason why that game should not be available to download. But the whole move away from physical media to digital media basically locked out the Series S from that experience. The only reason we could actually get the coverage into Tom's video is because by lucky hap, Oliver bought the Orange Box on Xbox back in the day, and it was still in the library.
Yeah.
But it's going to be that sort of licensing issue that would stop some sort of jailbreak, official jailbreak, because there's just so many vested interests in those platforms that could be potentially annoyed at having their content, basically
be free,
wide open for everybody to grab. But we did have a discussion with Phil Spencer at Gamescom about the state of the Xbox 360 store and some of the stuff that's going to be missing because of that. And he was very cognizant of all of that. But I got the impression that he was looking to PC and the PC versions of the various games to kind of fill the hole there,
right?
Which isn't a great solution, but the PC is the ultimate platform for preservation at the end of the day. I don't think there's too much more we can add to that. It's a really nice idea, but just not viable, I don't think. So with that, let's move on to the next question. This one from Kurtz, and it's a great question. PC graphics enthusiasts can now be divided into two groups: those who use Chaldean's Special K and those who haven't heard about it. It's been indispensable to me for controlling VSync modes, frame rate caps, latency mitigation, and HDR, where such settings are often lacking or even missing entirely from the game. All this in real time to boot. Stopping short of DLL injection, do you think it's time GPU makers implemented a similar toolset into their drivers, or are these features too niche for a more general audience? Alex, I'd say very often there's the case that something crops up and it's like, Nintendo hire this guy. But surely in this case, should be Nvidia hire this guy.
Yeah,
Special K is just incredible.
Special K has a lot going for it. It's also the fact that it's a user in-game UI helps a lot. The drivers, respectively, I do like NVIDIA drivers in spite of the archaic interface. I actually find it very usable. It's just the speed is so slow. It's just so slow. It's a very usable interface, but it's just slow. On the other hand, you have like Radeon and Intel who have much more modern interfaces, but they're much more nested in a way that is maybe not always so useful, even though they have the speed going. So it's very interesting to see that. I would love to have some of those features that Chaldean works on there in the drivers and the same way they're accessed via UI in real time in the game. I don't know if it happens anytime soon, though. I would definitely advertise to any of the IHVs when I talk to them that they need to do something like this. But some of the stuff is already in there. VSync flip modes, not so much so, but you got driver VSync control. You have driver, at least on the NVIDIA side. I don't know if there is an arbitrary limit on the AMD one. I know you can use Radeon Chill to do that, maybe.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so then you can. And in that aspect, you do have frame rate limiters. And if you're on VRR, I don't think frame rate limiters are very different if you're in VRR. I think it's only if you're pure VSync that frame rate limiters start showing their very large differences between each other. So some of this stuff really great, some of it not so useful because the driver's already doing it. But I guess the aspect around controllable HDR with Special K is one of the things that John uses all the time, and he would advertise.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't really your sort of area, Oliver, but do you have any thoughts on this? I mean,
no.
Do I have any thoughts on this? Yeah, I mean, I think Special K is very useful for me on like the ROG Ally locking frame rates. I mean, it's a convenient tool. The NVIDIA control panel is a little archaic in a lot of ways, and this is easier. Obviously, on the ROG Ally, you don't have the benefit of an NVIDIA control panel either. So, no, I don't know. I like having all those tools in one place. I like it for locking frame rates. I like it for just letting me tweak a game, have refresh rate, VSync, all this stuff. On my main computer, I have no real need for it because I have no trouble hitting the refresh rate cap in any game I'm playing, pretty much. So I don't really feel the need to tweak around with the settings so much. But yeah, it is a really cool tool, and perhaps NVIDIA hire this man. I don't know.
NVIDIA hire this man.
I think the issue is that the great thing about Special K at the moment is that it runs on anything, right? Yeah. Chaldean's put in so much work onto this. The frame rate cap stuff that he's done, the latency mitigation on the frame rate caps, that stuff that he's done. NVIDIA hasn't touched any of that. It's really cutting edge stuff. And I don't know, it would be great to have these features added to a GPU control panel, but at the same time, I just love the fact that Special K seems to work on everything and works well and delivers solutions that maybe they are niche, right? But
that's fine.
Who cares? You know, the great thing about the PC is, you know, it's open and it's open to every niche. I think that's my take on it. So yeah, by all means hire him, but please don't kill Special K. Please. Okay. Final question here. This one from Leftist Hominid. Will you be doing a pixel count on the Jeffs, aka the TGAs, to find out if they are in native res or if they're using some sort of upscaling technique? It's not really the resolution that's the issue, more the quality that gets pumped to YouTube, I think.
Yeah.
Which we've discussed at length already.
Oliver, did you watch this online? Is this broadcast on television?
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Well, I watched it online. It was actually a 4K live stream, which I don't think is a feature that's available, or at least to my knowledge, it's not available commonly.
Publicly available.
Yeah,
No.
that did stand out. I mean, the 4K-ness of it, for sure, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, I pixel counted one game, and that was sub 4K. Some of the games might have been using 1080p trailer encodes for all we know. Certainly other media for some of these trailers has been uploaded at 1080p elsewhere, which would maybe suggest that's the case. So yeah, perhaps there's some, I don't know, bilinear upscaling. Well, certainly there is.
I do like the way that this entirely flippant question that we've just chosen to end the show with is, you took it literally.
You literally, did we count the Jeffs?
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess we did kind of pixel count the Jeffs after all.
Yeah, Jeff is, you know, beyond pixel counting.
Absolutely.
He's super sampled.
He's beyond 16K. Obviously.
Yeah. He's full retina. Yeah.
But that's it. That's the end of the show, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please do like, subscribe, share. If you did, by any chance, ring the bell for notionally instant notifications. All my notifications are now gone, apart from ones for Digital Foundry.
Yeah,
so
what's that
Random
about?
Gaming in HD. A bit disappointing. I have to check that out manually, it seems. But yes, DF supporter program. Join us, get involved, submit questions to the show, ask us, you know, anything you like, and store.digitalfoundry.net for the latest quote unquote merch. But that's it from this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.